Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're going to get started very shortly. We're just seeing some people trickle in. We'll give them 30 seconds or so, and then we'll kick things off.
All right, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for sharing a little bit of your day with us today. I know that your time is valuable, and we definitely appreciate the opportunity. And I'm the Director of Professional Services for Lume Strategies. I'm happy to have with me today Michael DePalma, the Senior Channel Development Manager from Datto. For those of you that may not be familiar with Datto, they specialize in backup and disaster recovery services and have been a very long-time trusted partner of Lume's. Before we dive into the main content for today, I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about Lume. As you see from the slide, we have an extensive selection of services that I'd be more than happy to dive deeper into as needed. But I wanted to spend a little time today answering a few common questions we get. First, specifically, what does we specialize in a holistic approach to technology services actually mean? We've tailored our service portfolio below with a single goal in mind: alignment of our customer technology and technology services with their business goals, objectives, and needs. More often than not, when we talk to prospects and businesses such as yours, we see a more traditional model of service delivery, mostly disjointed, one-off application services servicing a specific need with not a lot of synergy or alignment with each other. At Lume Strategies, we strive to ensure that all aspects of IT, whether it's hardware, software, or support, are operating to enable business growth and productivity. Lume is completely hardware and software agnostic, which allows us to support and recommend the right product that meets your needs and not just a product that will get the job done. Our Solution Center support model, for example, exceeds industry average service level agreements for desktop and end user support, which translates into less time end users are idle due to issues or challenges. The Solution Center is also our customers' cornerstone for all of their service needs, acting as a single point of contact. I'll close with one final thought that I get asked, and what makes Lume different from the thousands of other MSPs out there. And besides the holistic approach we take to IT and other defined characteristics of Lume is we purposely built the organization from the ground up to exclusively service small and mid-sized businesses. Our enterprise class services are not only affordable to this market, but also easily digestible to our clients, meaning they can scale up, down, and are very flexible to be tailored to meet each individual client needs. Business continuity, data security, and data protection, as you're all aware, have been popular buzzwords in the IT world for some time now, but since the onset of the pandemic, we'd like to move these buzzwords into actual priorities. And as your businesses rapidly move to either a full remote or a hybrid workforce, again, like we did in March, business continuity and data security should be very close second or even equally as important offerings. Please don't hesitate to call or email the directory. Thank you again for spending a portion of your valuable time with us today, and I'll shift control over to Michael DePalma to begin our discussion on protecting your data.
All right, perfect, Michael. So I'm Mike DePalma. I'm the Senior Channel Development Manager here at Datto. So we are a backup disaster recovery company based in Norwalk, Connecticut, so about 40 miles east of Manhattan. My job really is to do presentations like this. Normally, I'm on the road 3-4 days a week doing seminars and panels, and now I basically spend my time virtually doing the same thing. But I want to set the stage before we get into the meat of it, just to kind of give a context of where we are right now. I'm kind of a history nerd. Back when I was on the road, I was reading history books on the plane or watching documentaries and things like that. So in terms of a context of where we are, in every course of human history, every era, there's been some sort of technological advancement that has really propelled the human race forward. You look at the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Renaissance, all these things, and they were great. The problem is at every given stage, we've seen bad actors exploit that same technology. Now you fast forward to now, And if you go 1,000 years from now, people are going to look back at this time and clearly say this is the digital age, right? This is the digital transformation age. And to be honest, I mean, thank goodness we're in this age. When you think about the last 7 or 8 months, I mean, where would we be if we didn't have the ability to stay productive while working remote? That being said, just like every other time we've had this big technological advancement, there are bad actors exploiting that. And we're seeing a huge uptick in that because the criminals are opportunistic. And they know that right now, the business community is kind of spread around and they're not necessarily sitting in an office anymore, sharing all of their data on a single server. Data lives in so many different places. And so when we look at some of the numbers, they're pretty staggering, just really across the board. And they've really seen this uptick, again, because of the opportunistic way that these guys are going about it. I mean, within a few days of the pandemic really hitting, there were emails going out that looked like they came from the CDC or the World Health Organization. Hey, click on this link to figure out cases in your area, or just some statistics globally. That Johns Hopkins website that everybody was following early on that was showing cases around the world and state by state. Within days, there was a malicious website that mirrored it almost exactly. It was created, it was shared on social media, which then kind of got spread out. People were texting it to each other. And if you clicked on it, it looked like every other website that you were seeing screenshots from, except instead it was sending you to a malicious website that might be infecting your network. And so these upticks are huge, and they continue to rise. And when we look at ransomware specifically, now I've been giving ransomware presentations for the last 5 years. And 5 years ago, I'd be looking at the audience and they'd be on their phones, or maybe some head nods here and there. But it really was this thing that was only happening at the enterprise level, or you would see hospitals or municipalities getting hit. So there was this false sense of security within the small business community of, why are they going to hit me? It's just never going to happen. But those stories are stories you need to follow, because yes, these large companies and municipalities are being attacked, but the strategy and the math that they want you to do is the same, and it can be scaled at any level. So I'll give you the example of the city of Baltimore. So city of Baltimore got hit with ransomware last year, and they were asked for what was essentially at the time about $75,000. Now, the government has been recommending for years that you not pay. So these municipalities publicly will never say that they pay. And they say, okay, we're going to remediate it, right? We're the city of Baltimore. We've got a huge IT team, great infrastructure. We can get all our systems back up and running. Well, the actual impact to the city of Baltimore from the single ransomware attack was $18 million. So there is the math right now. $75,000 for the ransomware ask, essentially, which actually impacted them at the tune of $18 million. Now, the government is finally, just in October, put out an official statement. I've sat on panels with FBI agents and folk from the Department of Homeland Security, and they'll tell you not to do it. But for the first time, the Department of the Treasury came out with a statement that said paying these ransom payments can actually be a violation of the law. And so the reason being is, yes, we are seeing the regular cyber attackers that are trying to make money, but oftentimes the folks that are behind these attacks are actually terrorist organizations or enemy nation states that, by paying this ransom, you're actually helping to fund that, and that's where you're in violation of the law. Now, City of Baltimore, they remediated all that stuff, right? Well, they just got hit again. Their school systems just got hit. And the reason being, yes, they went and they restored all their data and they got their systems back up online, but they didn't learn their lesson. And there's a huge amount of businesses that are hit once. They, at the small business level, they typically pay. They think they can move on with their day, but then they get attacked again. It's like the bully in the cafeteria. Once they know they can get through and potentially they can make some money, they're going to keep attacking. So it is one of those ongoing kind of strategies that you need to have to protect yourself now, but also understand, the changing landscape, and understand that security is not something that you just buy and you say, okay, I made an investment in 2019 in security, I'm good. That is not how security works, unfortunately. It's something that you really need to continuously monitor and address and tweak and all these different things. So to get back to who these threat groups are, it's pretty interesting. People still think it's the guy in his basement doing these attacks so he doesn't have to get a real job. That's not the case anymore. This is truly a corporate structure. There are folks out there that develop these ransomware viruses, and they're the really smart tech people, but they then sell that off to the next layer. I call that the sales team. There's folks that will then buy those ransomware viruses, and then they're the ones that go and do those attacks. there's even another layer at the larger scale level. There's tech support. They will attack you. They will say, give me this money in Bitcoin, and then it'll pop up and say, hey, you don't know how to set up a Bitcoin account? We'll walk you right through it. We'll give you the links of where you got to do, and we'll get you back up and running. So it is truly a corporate structure. There are places right now in the world where people go and they punch a time card, they sit at a desk all day long, they do all of these attacks. At the end of the day, they punch out, they go home, they have dinner with their families, they go to Little League games. It is truly a corporate structure. I think that's important to understand when you understand what we're up against. Organized crime, it's not like the movies anymore. This is where they're making their money. They understand that the organized crime is going to find ways to make money, and this is a spot where they could make a whole lot of money with very little risk of getting caught. So organized crime here in the States, Europe, Asia, all throughout the world are understanding there's huge amounts of money to be made, and they know that this is a lot less risky than some of the other ways they were making money in the past. I mentioned those foreign nation states. I was on a panel with a gentleman from the Department of Homeland Security about 3 weeks ago, and he said flat out, we could put all of these sanctions in place and all these different types of things, but these folks are going to figure out ways to make money, and this is one of them. And so these guys are very, very sophisticated. And so, the small business community is a lot of just low-hanging fruit. And then just to give you a little something else, the Internet of Things. We see that, we talk about it all the time. It's kind of this broad, cliched idea. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I ask Alexa what the weather's going to be and all the rest. But I'll give you a little Google story you can go do and do a little homework. The greatest casino heist ever pulled was a couple of years back. And it wasn't, like I said, the traditional ways you would think they would do it, sneaking through the elevator shafts or all the rest. That's not how crime is done anymore. These criminals found a vulnerability in the internet-connected fish tank thermometer, those big fancy fish tanks they have in the casinos. They infiltrated the network. They were able to extract all the personal and financial information for all the high rollers. This is information that's worth tens of millions of dollars on the dark web. And, it'll pop up. I have a 54-year-old man. Here's all of his information. We know he's a high roller. He gambles at the Wynn or whatever casino was attacked. And, here, I'll sell this off to you for $20,000. And again, when I talk about that corporate structure, then there's that next layer. Okay, I have the information. Now it's my turn to exploit it. The people that extracted the information have made their money by selling it off, and they're on to the next attack. So it's a kind of a well-oiled machine. Now at Datto, we've done ransomware studies each of the last 4 years. It's really the largest of its kind that's focused specifically on the small business community. So we talk to the managed services community, the folks like Lume, and get their input. And we also talk to the small business community to get our own numbers. We confirm them with third parties. We want to get our own numbers. And what we see is the same old thing, right? Phishing emails are still the number one way these guys are getting through. That's why education is truly the easiest way you can prevent these attacks. Again, when you hear another catchphrase, the socially engineered spear phishing attacks, what that means is they're gathering information about you that you freely give out on the internet, whether it's on LinkedIn or Facebook or all the rest. And so when those emails come out, they look like every other email in your inbox. It's no longer the email from your long-lost uncle telling you he's gonna make you a millionaire in his will if you send him $10,000. This is really the number one thing. And then again, cybersecurity training. These are all things that really don't cost money, or they cost very little money, but they allow you to protect your business really better than any technology really can. When we look at the impact, you saw the numbers from the city of Baltimore, $75,000 ransomware ask, $18 million impact. The biggest impact, loss of business productivity, and that business-threatening downtime. FEMA put out a study last year that said that 60% of small businesses that are down for a week or more never reopen their doors. Now, they're talking about natural disasters and storms and floods and all the rest, but downtime is downtime. The criminals know that businesses can't float that. The city of Baltimore is not going to go out of business. But when you look at the criminal strategy, I'm a big Mets fan, unfortunately, big baseball fan. So I put it in the context of that. The criminals can fit into two buckets. They could be the home run hitters that go after the large Fortune 500 companies, hospitals, and try to, get the big six-figure payouts, knowing that they're going to have a smaller success rate. Or they could be the singles hitters, and they can go out and attack thousands of small businesses every day, knowing that A, they're probably going to be more vulnerable and they're going to probably have a higher success rate of getting through, but they're also going to have a higher success rate of getting them to pay because businesses don't have the ability to float that. And the most staggering stat within this, and again, I've been doing these presentations for years, and I can remember 2018 using the numbers. Average ransomware payment was $4,300, right? Not enough to break the bank. the actual impact from the downtime that this cost was 10 times higher, $46,000. It was a big number. Look at that, how that has progressed. The actual ask for the ransom payment really hasn't increased that much, but the impact to the business community, $274,000 was the average cost of that downtime and data loss and all the rest. And you think about being down for a week, you start to put into perspective of what that'll cost. And everybody listening is going to have a different number that they'll come up with, right? Everybody produces revenue at a different rate, but you start to put, okay, how much would it cost me to be down a week, even a day, even 8 hours? The one thing, and I could sit here for half an hour and go through acronyms, but the two that really I want you to understand, because the criminals understand them very well, and you should at a minimum be able to answer these questions, are your RPO and your RTO. The RPO is the simple one. That's your recovery point objective. How much data are you at risk of losing at any given time? Simply put, how often you're taking your backups, right? If it's daily, you're saying, okay, I could absorb losing a day's worth of data. Maybe it needs to be hourly. Maybe it could be a week. Everybody's different, right? But the criminals know that most of the businesses that they attack are going to have some form of backup. I talk to very few businesses that aren't backing up their critical data in some form or fashion. So if that was the only piece of leverage that they had, they really wouldn't make a ton of money. The leverage really comes from the right-hand side of the screen. That's your recovery time objective. How much downtime would you incur until your systems are completely back up and running into a production environment? How long would it take you to get that data back onto a new machine? Are you just storing your data off-site in the cloud? That's great. All right, it's a safe secondary location. You got the geo redundancy. But have you ever tried to pull down several terabytes of data from the web? This is going to be, a time-consuming piece. And then, oh, by the way, you've got to get that data onto a new piece of hardware, install all of the operating systems and all the rest. So this is really why people pay, because again, the criminals put you in that situation where, hey, pay me this ransom, or go ahead and go to restore your data, and then call me in a week when you've absorbed $270,000 worth of downtime. And oh, by the way, you've waited a week. Well, now that ask is doubled. So this is the real focus here, and this is the reason why. And another thing is, only about 25% of small businesses even report these ransomware attacks. And there's two reasons for it. One is the FBI is not going to put a ton of resources into looking for a $5,600 ransomware ask. They just don't have the bandwidth to do that. But the bigger reason why they don't report it is because they don't want it to get out. They don't want that hit to their reputation. They don't want to be known as the business in their community or in their industry that's been hit, because word spreads fast. And even though with ransomware attacks, they're not necessarily stealing your data, there's still that stigma of this company was attacked, they were breached. I don't know if I want to do business with them. And so when we look at some tips and some tricks as to how we combat this, a lot of these things are simple things that might seem simple as you're reading this, but it truly is not something that the business community is doing. First and foremost is understanding that you are a target right now. Back when I was on the road, I would get the question almost every presentation, okay, tell me, what are the chances I get attacked? What are the real chances I get attacked, in 2021? It's the easiest question you could ask me, because the chances are 100%. You're being attacked right now. It's a matter of whether they're getting through your intrusion protection, and then whether most likely somebody's opening the door and letting these folks into your system. So understand that. One of the other stats that came out of our ransomware study was that 95% of those managed service providers thought that this was a real epidemic, this ransomware wave that we're seeing. It's something that everybody should be highly concerned about. We then talked to the small business community, and we talked to the business owners. Is this something you should be highly concerned about in 2021? 30% said yes. That number actually dropped. Last report, it was 40%, which means that people like me that go out and do these educational seminars clearly aren't doing a good job, because it's mind-boggling. When you look at the statistics and the amount of money involved in this, for business owners to look at this and say, this is not really something I need to be highly concerned about, is something that the criminals love. They love that statistic, because, okay, but don't worry about us. We'll just continue to perpetrate these attacks. The simplest thing you can do is put together policies and procedures that are written out and have been reviewed with everybody on your team regularly, not just on an onboarding process, but regularly, and they can be accessible to everyone. I can tell you, before I came to Datto, if I had clicked on a malicious link and that scary red screen that says, hey, you've been infected with ransomware, pay me some money, came up on my screen, I don't think my first step is to go walk down the hall and tell my boss, hey, I just clicked on something I wasn't supposed to, or I was on a website I wasn't supposed to be on. I think I infected. No, I'm going to try to remediate it on my own, right? Or I'm going to call a buddy that knows a lot about technology. Hey, can you help me out? And the longer I'm doing that, the more systems that virus is going to go infiltrate. And so everybody within your organization needs to know what that step is. It's human error. 91% of these attacks happen because of human error. It happens. We're humans. But what do you do in that moment to isolate that machine, to hopefully, contact your IT provider? What's going on? What are those next steps? This needs to be documented. And hopefully over the last 7 or 8 months, you've been doing some form of kind of lessons learned, as I would call it, to say, okay, here were some of those pain points back in April when we were all trying to figure out how we were going to stay productive. Beyond just the cyber threat side of things. Have this documented. Have folks from the outside, have Lume come in and help work with you on that, so that you're doing a gap analysis and making sure that you are protected and everybody knows what's going on. That leads into the ongoing training. Yes, you're going to have these policies and procedures in place. They're going to be reviewed. Hopefully everybody understands them. But training typically only sets in for about 2 to 3 weeks. Right? Hopefully you're going to listen to these stats and hear these tips, and you're going to go back and you say, okay, I understand the threats. I'm going to be very vigilant. And then 3 weeks from now, it's human nature. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So training needs to be ongoing, hopefully quarterly. But there's also systems where you can continuously have training. At Datto, we have, we get these fake phishing emails all the time, and they look really legit. A lot of times they look like they're coming from internally, from Datto. And I'm super paranoid about it. So I always go into our database and see if this person actually works for Datto. And if they don't, I forward that over to our phishing team, and I get a little bounce back saying, hey, congratulations, Michael. You listened to our training and you spotted a fake phishing email. Good job. But if I were to click on that malicious email or open an executable file, I'll get another bounce back email. It says, hey, congratulations, Michael. You just enrolled yourself in a new hour-long tech training because you clearly didn't listen the first time. You start doing these regular trainings, you will see the number of folks clicking on this link dropping dramatically right away, because now they're super vigilant about it. So it needs to be something that kind of creates this culture of security. Now, password management, another way that these guys are getting through is through passwords. Now, 5 years ago, #1 password in the world, password 1234, right? Now, even after all of these attacks, it's still some sort of variation of that. Maybe you threw an exclamation point in, instead of the 1, or an ampersand. That doesn't slow these guys down at all. This is something that they're running programs, they're breaking those codes within seconds. And so, you got to take a look at, okay, how long is my password? And I know those things get frustrating. It's got to be 16 digits. It's got to include a number and an uppercase letter and a symbol. And those things seem frustrating. But if you do some of the math and you look at those, and you look at a password that's got 8 digits of all letters, that will be cracked in a matter of seconds. Literally a second, so these programs will crack it. You go up to 16 symbols, 16 different letters and numbers and symbols, that now becomes 70 years. So, this is important. But another piece of this is multi-factor authentication. The first thing that I do when I sit down at my computer and I go to log in, it's got to send me a bounce back to my phone and say, are you signing in from this location? I click yes, it does a facial recognition, and it lets me into my system. It takes all of 10 seconds. It amazes me how many people don't have that. A lot of the systems, a lot of the business applications that you're using already have this. You just have to turn it on. I presented in front of a school board earlier this year as they were putting together their budget for their IT budget up here in Connecticut. And I looked at their IT and I said, you guys don't have multi-factor authentication. This is crazy. It's not expensive. And they said, okay, we're going to put it into our budget. Then the pandemic hit. And everybody was working remote here in Connecticut, all over the place. And I just talked to them about a month ago. And I said, well, how's everything going? Did you put in that multi-factor authentication that we talked about? And the IT director said, no, we haven't. We didn't want to burden the teachers with another thing to learn about because they're all working remote and they have to get trained on all that. It was truly mind-boggling to me. Anybody could learn this in a matter of minutes. It's just a matter of putting the programs in place, and it's simple and it's inexpensive. A lot of times it's free with the software that you have. Another piece is just not leaving devices unattended. Back when I was in my traveling days, Starbucks was my second office. I was there working all the time around the country, and it amazed me that every day I would see people leave their laptops open as they went up and got a cup of coffee. or even worse, went to the restroom or went outside to take a phone call. Now you're in a public place on a public Wi-Fi and you're leaving devices unattended. Now maybe it was a personal laptop, maybe it was a laptop that had critical business data on it. It amazed me. Even now, as folks are working remote, I mean, I have a 7 and a 9-year-old. They love Minecraft, they love Fortnite. I don't think that they're trying to do anything malicious, but if I leave my business laptop open, there's a chance of them going on there and Googling some new things and going down a rabbit hole of clicking on links that they don't know might be malicious. And now I've infected my network. I never leave this laptop open or unlocked, never. If it's got critical business data on it, you should not either. So understanding that, taking an inventory of where all your devices live is critical. That goes into being careful of what you click on. Obviously, there's a lot of ways these guys are getting through. They're very creative. You do those little Facebook quizzes. Hey, how much do I know about Disney movies? Sounds fun. They're just collecting your data. You know, all of these different sources. There's so many viruses that go out through social media and all the rest. I don't know about anything that comes through Facebook Messenger. I will always write it back and say, hey, buddy, can you just let me know this isn't malicious? So be careful what you click on, but understanding where all of your devices live is critical because they might be bouncing back and forth from a home office to the main office and back and forth. Know where those physically live is critical. Obviously, you have to have your antivirus in place and your malware protection. Those have to be there. I will give you, I'm not in that world. With nothing that we do sells antivirus, but if it's free, there's a reason why it's free. Right, so understanding those systems and then also understanding how they integrate is critical. Now, backups is the world that I live in, and they're critical. And data lives in so many different places right now. And that's where it comes down to that downtime, because it's more than just backups. The backups have evolved, just like every other piece of technology that you have. Although most businesses are still living in the traditional file and folder backup. Business continuity is really a new way of looking at it. And at the enterprise level, those companies have been using business continuity for years. And it really wasn't until about 10 years ago that there were products available to the small business community that gave them the same functionality that those enterprise co-location type systems worked. And so what it is a couple things that kind of are standard to a true business continuity solution. First and foremost, a hybrid solution. Understanding that, yes, you're going to have an on-premise backup, but it's also going to be replicated to off-site data centers. So you have this geo-redundancy. Yes, cyber threats are the #1 threat, but we still do see storms and disasters that might impact that physical device. So you want to have multiple copies of your data in different geographical locations. You also want to make all of these things automated. When I have conversations with folks, again, most people say, yes, I'm backing up my data, but then I go and say, okay, who's responsible for that? Is there some manual aspect to the actual taking of the backups? My last company, a large construction management firm that did $300 million hospitals, we were backing it up to NAS devices on our own. I mean, and this wasn't that long ago. And so you want to be able to say, okay, let's look at that RPO goal that we have. Hourly, okay, let's set up the schedule. We're going to be backing up hourly. Got it. Okay, all of those backups are going to occur automatically, and they're all going to be tested automatically as well. You could say all you want about your RPO and say, okay, we're backing up hourly. If you're not testing those backups, there's no way you could answer that question, because you might have an hourly backup and then you get attacked and you find out, oh, those backups have been failing for the last 3 weeks. Well, now that star on the left side of the screen jumped from 1 hour to 3 weeks. So it needs to be constantly backed up, constantly tested, both locally and then making sure those offsite syncs, that geo-redundancy is tested as well. And maybe you get an X here instead of the pretty blue circle. And yes, now this backup has failed. At least now your team, the folks from Lume, can go in and address that proactively, get those backups back up and running, or find out, okay, this was a false negative or whatever it was, so that you know if you're attacked that you're protected. Now, the way that the backups occur is much different as well. Instead of the traditional kind of commoditized form of backup that's looking at files and folders, this is an image-based solution. So it actually takes a snapshot of that entire server. It's capturing not just the files and folders, but the operating systems, all of those applications. Everything that lives on that server is now ultimately replicated to that on-premise device and then subsequently sent off to those 2 data centers. And what this allows you to do is set up what's called an inverse chain. You're going to get that big base image, whatever that is. It could be several terabytes of data. It's going to then be sent off to the data centers. We actually Datto sends a round trip drive up to get speed that process up. And then you set up that schedule that we just saw. And all that's happening here is another base image is not being taken. It's just looking at block level incremental changes. So the changes that occurred between those two backups. And what I mean by inverse chain is now that instead of being layered upon previous backups, every one of these backup points is independent of one another. So if you get hit at 11 o'clock in the morning by ransomware, you could roll back and take that time machine back to 10 o'clock, and you know that backup is valid and that it's not been infected. It also gives you the ability to detect ransomware, not looking at individual variants because there's millions of them out there, but instead looking at the footprint that these attacks leave, because now you're looking at all these backups going along and the incremental changes that are occurring. They're all happening pretty much at the same rate. All of a sudden a ransomware attack occurs and boom, everything's infected. It's going to jump off the screen. And so an alert will automatically get sent out and say, hey, this looks a lot like a ransomware attack. Take a look at it. Again, maybe it's a false alert and you did need to take a full backup, or there was some huge data change that occurred in all your files for some reason in that 1 hour time frame. But at least, again, you're being proactive about it. And it's going to tell you when your last clean backup was. Because ultimately, the only way you really combat downtime is to get your business back up and running as quickly as possible. And virtualization allows you to do that. And what that means is somebody in your office gets the scary red screen. It's now migrated to your servers. Your servers are locked up. Your first reaction is not to say, all right, we got to go restore from our backup, because that's going to take a long time. Your first reaction is, let's get everybody back up and running. So since everything that lived on that server has been replicated to that device, this would now be spun up as a virtual machine, and this would be operating as your server. If it's happening at the local level, most folks in the organization won't even know this occurred. You're going to have access to all those applications. You're going to be able to make changes and save those changes. It's a true production environment. And so you could be in this virtualized state for several hours, several days, several weeks even, while that device that was infected is being replaced and some forensics have been done. And so when you're ready to get back and into a new piece of hardware, you get all of that data back, including the operating system, the applications. It's called what's a bare metal restore. And you could start that process while you're still in that virtualized state. So now you're closing the downtime on the front end to minutes or hours instead of days or weeks, and you're closing it on the back end as well. So the benefits are clear. Remember that $274,000 number is a real number. And so if you could reduce that downtime, you're going to reduce that number dramatically. And you're going to answer those RTO and RPO questions, because, again, that RPO goal is going to be met by all that testing that's happening with the actual backups. But these virtualization capabilities are tested as well every single night. They're being tested. It's being brought up in the background to a boot screen. A snapshot is taken of it where you can see that boot screen with a timestamp, so that you know when you come into work on a Monday that regardless of what happens that week, you know you are able to keep your business up and running through these virtualization capabilities. And you can do that either locally or from the data centers. We particularly have one in Reading, Pennsylvania, one out in Salt Lake City, Utah. We just chose those locations because they're on the opposite sides of the country, so you've got true geo-redundancy. And so you can be operating out of the data centers. And we saw that really during hurricane season this year, as thousands of businesses were able to operate remotely from those data centers. So this is how you take away that second piece of leverage. If you've backed up your data, you know that these ransomware attacks mean that you're not going to lose data. If you're able to virtualize and you're able to reduce that downtime, there's no reason to pay these criminals, because they're not slowing down your production. And that's what we're looking at. So when you talk about backups, it's more than just having a second copy of your data. These are the conversations you really need to have with Michael and his team. Mobile device policy needs to be part of that policies and procedures that we talked about. There are ransomware attacks occurring at the both Android and iPhone level. And then lastly, and this is kind of the fluffy piece of it, but I think this is important, understand your team, understand your entire workforce. Everybody's living in different situations. You might take the assumption of, hey, they're staying productive. We're able to communicate with them and collaborate and all the rest. Everybody is going through a different situation as they bounce back and forth from their home office and all the rest. I mentioned I've got a 7 and 9-year-old. They go a week from remote learning and then they're not remote learning. And everybody thinks of, oh my goodness, the parents must be having such a tough time. Everybody is having a tough time. What about that single person living in a one-bedroom apartment that haven't been able to leave and go see their family or anybody else? They also don't have a proper workspace. They're working from their bedroom. Understanding, again, that inventory that we talked about, making sure that everybody in your organization has the tools that they need to stay successful, making sure that they are abiding by those security measures. Because again, you're more apt to click on one of these malicious emails when you're sitting in your bedroom than you are when you're sitting at your cubicle. It's just human nature. Your guard gets let down. So understanding what their work environment looks like is critical. Having those open conversations. They might not want to share that openly, but you have the conversation of, tell me what you need. A lot of times, again, these aren't expensive measures you need to put in place, but making sure it will help both with productivity, but also on that cybersecurity side. Extremely critical. The good news is, as a business community, we are headed in the right direction. We are seeing more and more companies join webinars like this, asking for resources. I'm asked to do a lot of chamber presentations and all the rest, because I do think that 30% number is going to start to increase when we talk about business owners understanding the risks. We are really embracing the world that we live in right now. There are all the collaboration tools. I'm sure you're working with a lot of different business software systems you might not have been at the start of the year. Again, putting all of that into an inventory and understanding where all of that stuff is critical. So if anybody has any questions, everybody's muted, but there is a chat box there that you can type in some questions. I also want to bring Michael back in and ask if you have any parting thoughts as we kind of wrap things up here.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, that great presentation, and we definitely appreciate your time. I guess in terms of a parting thought, much like cybersecurity, backup, and disaster recovery, the landscape that everybody had 12 months ago, 9 months ago, was a small bubble around their office environment, maybe a cloud environment here or there. But that bubble's expanded now outside to people's homes and God knows where else, they're working at. So I think you hit the nail on the head there in the one slide where you're talking about that the shift in terms of data protection and security is, and it hasn't been for a while. Everybody in IT has known it hasn't been a technology solution in a while, but it's really that shift in the corporate culture and the company culture to, more of enforcing policies and more of users understanding their role and their responsibilities in protecting the data regardless of where they're working at. So I thought that was an excellent slide that really resonated in today's time.
Yeah, and I think, next steps, this is the time to have that conversation. Take a look at what you have. At a minimum, when you're looking on the backup side, make sure that you can answer those RPO and RTO questions, and then make sure you can figure out if that's aggressive enough. That's really where I think, you reach out to Michael and just have them come in and take a look at what you have. Potentially, you're completely protected, and that's great. And now you've got a second set of eyes that have given you that checkbox. Most times there will be some sort of gap in there. And so you can figure out, okay, let's fill that gap. And, you could sit there and think you've put everything down on those policies and procedures, but a second set of eyes will definitely allow you to make sure that you don't have any gaps. And I also, when you're putting those together, I encourage you to put together a task force within your organization. Make sure that different departments have buy-in to this. It will help them really abide by that because they felt like they helped put that together. But you will find things that you didn't think about from different departments. There are a lot of times that there's business applications that some departments are using that the owner doesn't even know about, and they don't know who's monitoring those and who's really ultimately responsible for that. So I really, encourage that, because I think that, this is the time to do that. And I really believe agility is the key here. We don't know where, hopefully we're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel here, but agility moving forward is always going to be critical, because that's just the way business is being done nowadays. I don't know that it's going to be as many boardroom meetings sitting around a long table, even if we are able to come through this safely. That would be my parting suggestion there with that. I don't see any questions coming in, but I do want to thank everybody. Michael, do you have any parting thoughts before we wrap things up? This has been recorded, so if you want to share that with anybody within your organization, please feel free to do that. But Michael, anyway, how they can contact you best for kind of next steps?
Yeah, like I said, my contact information is the front slide, but hensleyM@lumestrategies.com. Our 800 number shown on the screen, or our info@ address. You can also reach out to those of you that were invited from your Cara account managers. They're our sister company under the Aileron umbrella. and we'd be happy to answer your questions. We also have some free resources on our website under the blogs and white papers. And if anybody is interested in understanding their true cost of downtime, we do have a downtime calculator that we can share the link to, that you can put in your specific information and modify it and see exactly what downtime really costs you. So again,
Perfect.
Mike, I definitely appreciate you, Datto's time, everybody else on the phone as well. We appreciate your time, and I know the back-end team here is rapidly pushing through the Uber Eats orders, so you should be receiving those if you haven't already very shortly.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for including me in this. I really appreciate it. Everybody stay safe. Have a great holiday season, and thank you again for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you.